program for Social Security, now pending before the Congress, is a necessary part of the future unemployment policy of the government. While present and projected expenditures for work relief are wholly within the reasonable limits of our national credit resources, it is obvious that we cannot continue to create governmental deficits for that purpose year after year. We must begin now to make the provision for the future. That is why our Social Security program is an important part of the complete picture. It proposes, by means of old age pensions, to help those who have reached the age of retirement and to give up their jobs and thus give to the younger generation greater opportunities for work and to give to all a feeling of security as they look toward old age.
President Roosevelt and the Committee on Economic Security championed the Social Security Act that was passed by Congress on August 14, 1935. This legislation seeks to minimize the potential devastation of future economic depressions. Financial aid will also be given to needy children and handicapped individuals. Eligible recipients of the old age pension constitute approximately 50% of the workforce. Farmers, freelance workers, and employers with fewer than 10 employees are excluded from the program. Entitled workers will receive monthly payments ranging from $10 to $85 upon their retirement. The welfare services outlined in the Act will be funded by a payroll tax. A portion of the payroll tax will be withheld from the employee's paycheck, while the other fraction will be paid by the employer. President Roosevelt stresses the negligible magnitude of the payroll tax. Only 1% of the first $1,400 in the employee's annual salary will be taxed. The Social Security Act is a highly controversial piece of legislation. Republicans have already condemned the program, claiming that its excessive handouts will deteriorate the work ethic of American citizens. Needless to say, this act marks a great shift in the role of the government.
This law represents a cornerstone in a structure which is being built but is by no means completed. A structure intended to lessen the force of possible future depressions, to act as a protection to future administrations of the government against the necessity of going deeply into debt to furnish a relief to the needy. A law to flatten out the peaks and valleys of deflation and of inflation. And in other words, a law that will take care of human needs and at the same time provide for the United States an economic structure of vastly greater soundness.
Currently, New Deal programs have come under severe criticism by such forceful leaders as Huey Long and Father Charles Coughlin. To subdue this growing tide of unrest and shrink the unemployment rate, President Roosevelt enacted the Works Progress Administration on May 6, 1935. Headed by federal advisor Harry Hopkins, the organization hopes to employ up to 8 million people by the year 1945. This multifaceted organization projects costs of up to $10.5 billion. Under this program, citizens across the nation will construct public buildings, roads, and bridges. Participants will also mold the environment, creating national parks for the benefit of society. Unorthodox jobs such as cricket control and monkey pen construction will also be included. Indeed, this substantial administration will employ a vast array of individuals. High school and college students will be employed to augment their family's income and support their studies. In addition, Federal One, a division of the Works Progress Administration, will encompass such factions as the Federal Writers Project, the Federal Art Project, and the Federal Music Project. These projects will provide employment for artists to compile local histories, paint murals, and give concerts.
Good evening. Today, as part of the Federal One project, under the Works Progress Administration, Henry Alsberg and John Newsom have organized the Federal Writers Project. This organization is intended to give jobs to unemployed writers. These men and women will compile state guides, books for children, accounts of regional and oral histories, and anthropologic studies. We estimate that this will employ up to 7,000 workers.
Wages will range from $19 to $94 per month and will be based upon individual skill and the average salary in that region of the country. Because the Supreme Court deemed the National Recovery Administration unconstitutional, the Roosevelt administration created the National Labor Relations Act, or Wagner Act. This act will protect a majority of laborers against abuses by employers and reinforce their right to strike.
on account of the recent strikes in San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Toledo, and in lieu of the National Recovery Administration, Congress has enacted the National Labor Relations, or Wagner Act. This legislation will bolster the common worker and help establish a system of labor relations with the employer and the government, and the National Labor Relations Board will regulate employer practices. This act legitimizes labor unions and establishes a system of elected labor negotiators. In addition, it promotes organization among unskilled workers and protects union members from unjust dismissals.
Thus, employers' decisions are subject to direct scrutiny by the federal government. Seeking to ensure workers' self-organization, the Act aids laborers in electing representatives and bargaining with employers. The Wagner Act also largely promotes the unionization of unskilled workers. Although this act constitutes groundbreaking legislation, it may need to gain the approval of the scrupulous Supreme Court before it is widely accepted by employers.
On September 2nd, 1935, the Labor Day hurricane made landfall in the Florida Keys. It remains the strongest landfall recorded worldwide. In total, 423 people were killed by this devastating hurricane, 164 of them being local residents, and 259 were veterans employed on the road project. The hurricane left a path of near destruction in the Upper Keys. Nearly every structure was demolished. Construction on rebuilding the Keys began immediately after the storm hit. The construction of the 8-mile bridge was spurred by the hurricane. This road bridge would link the islands to mainland Florida.
September 2nd, 1935 was a tragic day for our country. As you all may know, the Labor Day hurricane had struck the United States in one of the hardest landfalls recorded. We have lost over 400 citizens. The Florida Keys are now desolate ghost towns, but we will rebuild. As of now, construction has begun on rebuilding the tropic islands, and a new project will commence on the creation of a roadway that will link the Keys to mainland Florida, so that evacuation will be easier and faster, thus preventing the loss of so many American citizens.
Italian dictator Benito Mussolini ordered the bombing of Adowa, Ethiopia by planes on October 2nd, 1935. The next day, the Italian army, led by General de Bono, invaded Ethiopia. After this assault, President Roosevelt urged a moral embargo.
In light of the recent brutal attacks on Adowa, I urge a moral embargo on all trade with Italy.
However, U.S. exports to Italy increased instead of decreased. On October 7th, the League of Nations officially declared Italy as the aggressor.
Radical populist and Louisiana Senator Huey P. Long died of internal bleeding today following an incompetent attempt made by his doctors to close his wounds. Long was shot once on September 8th in the Capitol building at Baton Rouge. Oh God, don't let me die. I have so much to do. The assassin has been identified as Carl Weiss. Weiss shot Long once before security forces returned fire and killed Weiss. Weiss's motive appears to be his father-in-law, Judge Benjamin Pavey, a political opponent of Long. It has been said publicly that Mr. Long should have recovered from his wounds and that his doctors effectively killed him. No autopsy is planned. What a way to end the season! This year's World Series was one of the most exciting ever. The Detroit Tigers have won their first series, beating the oldest team in baseball, which returned to October ball for the first time since 1918. The Cubs got out to a lead in the series by taking the first game in Detroit 3-0 behind the Lon Warneke 4-hit shutout. Then Detroit kicked into gear, taking 3 straight. The Tigers evened the score emphatically with an 8-3 win in Game 2. The next 2 games were close, but Detroit pulled them both out in the end. Game 5 was a replica of Game 1, with Lon Warneke giving an even better effort than his first. The Cubs staved off elimination, but it did not last long as the Tigers came through in Game 6. Goose Goslin singled home Mickey Cochran in the bottom of the 9th, and the Tigers finally won the series on their 5th try. They were still celebrating this morning in Detroit.
The Alfred Hitchcock film, The 39 Steps, has recently debuted in the United States. This movie, starring Robert Donat and Madeline Carroll, involves a man, Richard Haney, on the run from danger. This film begins with Haney meeting with a woman after a brawl at a memory show. At the man's apartment, she reveals secrets of her involvement in espionage. Soon, Mr. Haney is dragged into a world of assassinations, secret missions, and hitmen. One must pay credit to the beautiful cinematographic feats accomplished by Bernard Knowles. This action thriller is based off the famous novel written by John Buchan and published in 1915. Many are complaining of great deviations from the original source, with added romantic scenes and characters.